Good morning, everybody. Hope everyone's having a great time so far at this conference. I'm very excited to be here. My name is Burton Woodhull. I'm a first-year MBA here at MIT Sloan, and I'm extremely honored to introduce our panelists today. Today's panel is going to be Sponsorship Analytics, a new yardstick for brands and properties. Our guest here is Valerie Camillo. She is the Chief Marketing and Revenue Officer of the Washington Nationals. We got Nick Kelly, Director of Experiential Marketing at Anheuser-Busch. We have Kathy Carter. She's the President of Soccer United Marketing, which handles all the commercial marketing activities for the MLS. We also have Elizabeth Lindsay here, who is the Managing Partner of Wasserman. Today's panel is moderated by Jason Belzer. He is the founder of Game Inc., in addition to being a regular contributor to Forbes magazine and also a lecturer at Rutgers University. A couple of housekeeping items before we start. Like all the other panels, this panel will go on for 45 minutes, after which we'll be taking 15 minutes of questions from the audience. Please tweet your questions, hashtag sponsorship analytics, and the one with the most likes or retweets will be selected. Great. So without further ado, let me pass it over to Jason and we'll get started. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Can everyone hear me all right? Yes? Okay. So we're excited to speak to you today about sponsorship analytics and how companies and brands are using data to make better decisions on the business side. So to start, the concept of data analytics means really two things: gathering information to help you make business decisions, and then actually making those business decisions. So my first question to our panel, and we can start with Valerie at the end, is how do you go about gathering data, and how does that help you make a better decision?
So the first thing that we do is we've made an investment as an organization, as a property, in strategy and analytics writ large. And so 2 seasons ago when I started, we started to build out a dedicated department to strategy and analytics, and their entire function is to help us gather, collect, analyze, and recommend the use of this data. And then that integrates into our sales team, and they work as a collaborative team to help us pitch, to help us understand who to prospect, really every facet of our corporate partnership business.
Okay. How about you, Nick, being on the brand side, different perspective?
Our day is a little bit different. I mean, we have the data when we go into sponsorships to derive the ROI. What is the potential ceiling for us to get the total value out of it? But we also have to take into account sales. What are the direct impact on sales at retail, the direct impact on sales in venue? And honestly, it's a balance between the value of the IP, and we're in a unique situation where our product enhances the game experience. So we have to balance the value of the IP plus the value of the opportunity at the venues we partner with.
Not dissimilar actually to what Valerie was saying with the Nationals. In MLS and Soccer United Marketing, which is broadly looking at soccer in totality, we've had a data and analytics and strategy group for the league as a whole for a number of years. What we've recently added, though, is somebody that can specialize on the commercial aspect and how, in fact, we look at the insights relative to commercial. It's great when you have the broad data, and we are building more and more capabilities in that area on a daily basis, but now we're starting to look at it from more of a micro concept as it relates to sponsorship. And so that's where we are at the moment.
For us at Wasserman, we've been invested in this space and data and analytics since the inception of our company. This is something that's incredibly important to us, and we believe we've led this for many, many years before it was even popular to do so. However, what we believe is it's not data for data's sake. So we focus on truly understanding the brand and business imperatives that our clients operate under and collecting the right data that will help inform their decisions. I can guarantee you what American Express needs to make a decision is a very different data set than what Microsoft needs or what Scott's Miracle-Gro needs. These clients have very different things that help inform their businesses, so we focus more on collecting the right data for the right story to drive the right brand and business objective forward.
You know, and let me play off that for a second, because I think Nick, we were talking a little bit before, and the reality is I would suggest that the properties or have been a little further behind the brand and certainly perhaps the agencies where that's been a core component. And I think what we are doing from a property standpoint is catching up very quickly. Not in terms of how it informs our broad marketing objectives, but rather how do we take that information and make sure that we're sitting across the table with our agency partners, but also our sponsor partners, and actually really being able to use the data and be partners in that conversation. Because before it was incumbent on the client to actually have most of that information. And I think we as properties are now starting to really take our position relative to the brands and say, hey, we've got to be a partner in that conversation and to provide more insight.
And just to follow up on that, I think the one thing we've seen a lot recently is forever we've had to partner with a Wasserman or an evaluation agency to pull the data for us. Because when teams would come in or even leagues would come in, they would talk about how big their fan base is. They would give us, some details about they're the #1 most watched sport. They would go down to the market detail. But when we started drilling really into the engagement opportunities, to the household incomes, or do they prefer light beer over craft beer, looking for that data, we've seen very few teams actually come to us and do the work for us. We literally have to push and push and push. And one of the refreshing ones, and this isn't because Valerie's on the panel, was one of our new partners, and we haven't had a new partner in ages, was the Washington Nationals this year. And what we've been able to, they came to us and they brought us all the data so we didn't have to go digging. It allows us to speed up the process. It allows us also internally to sell into senior management, to sell into, all the way up, at a certain dollar amounts to our board of directors that this is the right investment. And, you help us tell the story why Anheuser-Busch can succeed here. It makes all of our jobs that much easier. We're singing from the same page. And if you understand our business, it makes us immediately feel that much better about stepping in the door with you guys.
And from a property perspective, what I saw both at NBA Teambo and when I actually went to work at a team at the Nationals is that oftentimes properties are pitching, we'll call it a generic proposal. It is a catalog of assets. Here's a sign you can buy. Maybe they have an activation idea thrown in, but you could almost change the cover of that presentation and give it to the next partner. And what we're aiming to do at the Nationals, and I think to Kathy's points, really a sea change in the industry, is to say, okay, let's find the marriage between finding a story, a customized story that is rooted in analysis, that we've picked this story for a reason, and some of it comes through initial meetings, and some of it comes through work and research and of a strategy and analytics team. And the back end of that is, of course, having a capacity, a data capacity to do that. And when it all comes together, you have a differentiated proposal as a property and a differentiated pitch, and hopefully a sale.
So Elizabeth, to Valerie's point, the buzzword in sponsorship is telling authentic stories. How does analytics help you do that?
Again, it's the blend. We talk a lot inside Wasserman of the blend of art and science and the blend of owning the head and the heart. You have to have both. So analytics provide that headspace that you need. It gives you the facts and the figures that you need to be able to make an informed decision. But if you can't decide what that decision is and you can't tell that story and sell it into a brand and prove to them exactly how it's going to move forward their objectives, either from a brand side or a business side, then it's moot. So we focus a lot on having both and bringing the marriage of those people inside the company together. Those who understand the data, the insights, the analytics, those who understand the brand and the story that that brand is trying to tell in the marketplace, and bringing them together and having them work simultaneously to put that forward. If you had one or the other, I think it becomes a wholly irrelevant point in isolation. It's the bringing of both sides of the equation together is where the real magic is.
Right. And so conceptually, this concept of art and science is very similar to when you look at analytics from a professional sports standpoint, saying, yes, the numbers say one thing, but does the chemistry work? Is it there? Does anyone have an example of a situation in which they looked at the numbers and they said, the numbers are great, but maybe this isn't the fit for us, or vice versa, where you said, this really seems like a great opportunity, but the numbers aren't exactly what we want?
I'll jump in. I think the big thing right now that we're looking at is, when you have basically every major sports league as your partner and 80-some pro sports teams, there's not a lot you don't have. So when we're presented opportunities for something we don't currently have, the data is very important. I think that a good example is that for college football right now, we'd love to be there. We know it's challenging, but at the same time, the fan duplication across college football and NFL is pretty close. So there's only a handful of opportunities out there. One opportunity we missed where the data was just that we didn't think would resonate was the Orlando soccer team for MLS. We didn't know it would be as big as it was. The data we saw on it was that the soccer landscape was too fragmented in Florida and it would never grow at the level that it did. That was a huge miss on our side. I think that we now are trying to fight our way to find a way to get some sort of relationship there. But I think that some of those evolving sports, like in esports, like MLS, it's still hard for us to really get a true barometer on what the opportunity is for us.
I'll comment on one that we've been working very diligently on, which is our relationship with EA. And everybody knows, and probably a lot of people in the room play FIFA. And it's actually probably one of the great entry points into becoming a soccer fan is playing FIFA. And what we've been working on, and we've had a long relationship with EA, and of course the MLS teams are integrated, the national teams are integrated into the game. But what we've been looking at with EA is what's the incidence of play, and what are the player ratings, and how does we use that as a fan development tool, and ultimately how do we now engage with EA to increase the number of people who play the game. And it's not so much that that the data is telling us something we didn't know, but rather we are steeped in the data to understand how can we create greater opportunity for them, either to have people come into the franchise to play the game, which is good for us from a fan development perspective, good for them from a gameplay standpoint, but also what do we do to increase the frequency of play. And so we've used, and of course they're a data company because they actually now have a much better and online mechanism to know who all is playing. And so we've gotten very, very deep into that particular relationship to understand how do we help them, and conversely, how do they help us. And so we've been able to populate an awful lot of our fan development tools in and around the EA FIFA relationship and how that interacts with Major League Soccer. And that one is one that when you thought about it, you thought, oh great, it's a great video game. But there are layers and layers and layers of data in there that we've been able to peel back to start to understand how that is going to increase MLS, but also how is that going to increase overall soccer fandom.
And I think in both of those examples, the key is the fan.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, as much as I absolutely adore an analytical point of view, and our entire company was rooted in that, you cannot ignore the fact that we are a passion-based industry. And the fans sitting in the stands don't care what numbers you crunch to get them in their seats. They care about the gameplay and the sport and the athlete and their heroes. And if we can't tell that story very authentically, no amount of data is going to own that passion the way that it needs to reach that fan. What we're trying to do, because God help us, we try to make everything a number. What we're trying to do is find a very methodical way on the qualitative metrics and evaluating in Orlando, the qualitative things as well as the quantitative numbers. And realizing it's the balance of art and science, the way you best capture that art is make sure that it is consistently applied art in every way you qualitatively look at it, but you simply can't ignore it. We are a passion-based industry and always will be, and the number one way to isolate a fan is to be inauthentic or to be cold or dispassionate in how you talk to them.
And exactly to that point, so when we think about, if we just went with the numbers to come up with a proposal price or evaluation, we'd miss a lot. Like
Yeah.
we'd leave a lot out. Like, so what is the value? We call it in Washington the DC multiplier. Like, what is the value of having the package, the marketing platform in Washington, knowing that the President of the United States comes to the park, knowing that the heads of all the cabinets come, the Supreme Court justices come. We had something like 718 members of Congress and their staff come last year. Like, what is the value of that? And you can't really put a number on that. So if you just stick to, let me take my puts and takes, and here's my number, you can leave a great deal on the table. We saw that. I mean, we have the Department of Transportation, the Capitol are within view of our park. And if you have a sign that's visible, well, that's something that you can't exactly put a number on. And so you have to tell a story that goes beyond just data points. And we found that to be a very effective approach.
So you in Washington obviously have a very unique value proposition. How do you then, we were talking before, and to you, Nick, as well, how do you measure return on investment? And if a brand comes to you and says, well, the numbers are telling us that this isn't a good investment, how do you then counter by saying, well, we think that this is, and here's why? Well,
I mean, I have asked the question before, what is the value you've put on having all of your platform in front of those entities? It's a question that they can't really answer directly either. And so then you have a conversation, and I think you move away from impression-based metrics, which I think is valuable for both the properties and for the brands.
Yeah, I'll tell you what we're doing in DC right now is actually one of the rare occasions for us where we have the opportunity to go in, and we've done a bunch of Nielsen data research in January, unbeknownst to the Nationals, and basically go out there and ask what's their affinity for Bud Light, what's their affinity for Budweiser, who is the official beer of the Washington Nationals right now. A lot of the type of stuff you would see in like an SBJ survey at the end of the year, but we've done that on our own. We've also asked a lot of other questions about consideration, and we'll do it at the end of the season. And we're not doing it with Nationals fans, we're doing it with the marketplace to understand how are we affecting the marketplace, because we want to affect Nationals fans, and we've got a long time to do that, and we hope the experience inside does that. But from a data perspective, we want to make sure, is there a tangible, significant lift in consideration of our product now that we're partners with the Nationals? We've been with the Redskins, we've been with some of the other guys in the marketplace, but this is the first new property in 5 years. So is there a lift there? I think the second one is, kind of to Valerie's point, it's extremely challenging for us to measure media equally. We buy bulk rates for social, digital, broadcast, and you'll never, as a sports property, be able to match the CPM on that. You'll never be able to match that rate card. So we have to, internally and within our own group and a lot of brands, we have to, hold ourselves that we're not going to get the same value because I'm not buying multiple tens of 20s of millions of dollars worth of broadcast. I'm buying a little bit on Nessun, or I'm buying a little bit here. So we have to balance that a little bit on what the reality is of what you're getting. But as a lot of our partners have seen, we're trying to get out of media because I can get media on my own. I don't need the same rate that you're selling me 30-second spots on your pre and post game show is the same rate you're likely giving it to the local bar or the local towing company. For us, it's much more about the fact that I can leverage my weight and my size nationally and locally both. So it's been a hard thing for us is that we can drive more value and ROI of our partnerships if we can remove the media.
Well, you bring up Nielsen numbers, and a lot of people now say that maybe you can't trust those numbers or that there's not always a rate card for things. How has, first of all, social and digital changed the industry, and do you always go by Nielsen? Is there other things that you look at, or is there?
I'll be quick. I mean, we go by Nielsen. I think the hard part for us is kind of goes back a little bit to more of the mindset that we can get a post out there, we can put money behind it, but if it's not an authentic post that ties to the passion of the fan base or ties to the sport, it's not going to work. So we can get the reach, we can get the engagement, but if it's not good reach, good engagement, and tell the story that we jointly as partners want to tell, it's a bad strategy for us. And regardless of what the data tells us, it's not going to deliver the right ROI.
Yeah, and I think what we'd say is put Nielsen over here. I think it becomes it's about measurement in some respects. And what we've seen in digital and social, and we just launched a new product over the last week with Audi called the Audi Player Index. And they invested in something that would allow for some sort of measurement around an athlete's performance in the match, and specific, obviously, to soccer. And what we're working on with them is how do we integrate that into the way our talent actually commentates on the game, and how do we actually use that now as a conduit, if you will, to analysis in and around the match itself for either the general consumer or the aficionado. And if you're successful in that, then it totally throws out any type of metric on that, because the integration for a partner into the match and into the storytelling of the match, you almost can't place a price on that, because how do you incorporate? And what we would say in digital and social and in sort of the volume of, or just the sheer number of ways that you can connect with a fan, it goes back to, I think, a point that Jason made earlier, which was authenticity. And how do you authentically combine your story as a partner with that of a property, and make it so that the fan looks at it as not an intrusion, but rather an additive component to what they're watching and to their experience. And that's where, to go back to the Nielsen point, we don't look at it necessarily on ratings, although obviously we all track all those things, but rather how can we look at measurement across more of a bespoke model, because it's not just about Nielsen. There's a million other measurement tools that really to tell the true story. That's what we're looking at daily.
Valerie, how do you leverage analytics to more effectively prospect and manage corporate partnerships with the
So the fact that we're doing that at all is rather new. Traditionally, what we've seen has been a model where the phone rings, right? So an agency will call, like, hey, we're looking to spend in Washington, and the sales team will basically be order takers. And then
I just have to stop for a second. I've been in soccer for a long time. Our phones never rang. Sorry, just had to say.
A little jealous moment there, huh?
So that's the best case scenario.
Wow.
They ring. And then the next step from that is that you have your sales team out in your, at the right events. So they're in the local market, and they're at the Chamber of Commerce, and they're at this event and that event, and they're trying to draw in business that way. And that's like sort of like the traditional state for a property. And we've said, okay, what if we apply an analytics layer to what we're doing here and look at who's bought from us in the past, who's buying in other markets that have facets that are applicable, and can we identify a set of criteria and a scoring system that identifies for us, because you can't go after, the initial list we started was like thousands of companies. Like, how do we get a subset of that might make sense for us to make a special investment in making an approach or a pitch or a concerted effort? And if you target the sales team in that way and you get them working on it on almost like a project basis, we've seen that we've gotten doors open that we never got open before. And so we really only started doing it within the last, I would say, 9 months. And the buy-in for it has been phenomenal from the sales team.
I will tell you that experience is not unique to the Nationals. And one of the suite packages or suite of services that we offer at Wasserman to properties is a valuation, targeting, measurement sort of suite of services that help properties figure out exactly that. How do I go to market effectively? How do I go to market efficiently? Who should I target? Where am I most likely to get the most success in my sales? And then therefore, how should I package it and price it to be competitive? That's a suite of services we offer, and we have for a number of years. That business within the last, I'm looking at my guys to keep me honest, probably 2 or 3 years has tripled for us through, sorry Kathy, inbound calls of teams and leagues and platforms across all the big 5 in the US, international teams, EPL, cricket, any sport you can think of. We're getting the inbound calls for properties for that set of services, and it tripled part of my business in the last 2 or 3 years. Wow. So that speaks to the passion, the hunger that the properties have for that data and that insight.
Elizabeth, we've talked about how this industry has changed almost completely in the last decade. Have you seen things, being on the property side as well as the brand side and consulting in both, what works and what doesn't from the sponsors?
I think it's highly specific to the brand. I think the best innovation or change that I've seen in the last 10 years of this industry is that those off-the-shelf proposals are going away. I would argue if we're doing our job correctly, those instances where the brand comes to you and says, then here are our numbers and they don't work for me, should go away, because you as a property and the brand should be sitting down together, figuring out and defining what the numbers and the metrics should be to begin with. Because like I said earlier, Amex is very different than Pepsi, is very different than Microsoft. So the biggest shift that I've seen is making it very, very specific to the brand and the partnership that's grown up between when they have the right relationship between the brands and the properties. MLS does this really well. You guys have always been really good about that, of sitting down and being very collaborative with your brand partners.
We have to work harder.
And smarter. And that sort of necessity drove a very collaborative process where before you even decide if the numbers work or they don't work, you sit down and define, what are my goals, what am I trying to accomplish, how do I move my business or my brand forward, and then you set up the right metrics and the KPIs in collaboration in conjunction with your partners. That's the biggest change, thank God, that we've seen in the last few years.
Nick, is there something that Anheuser-Busch used to do that you guys are completely out of now with the new numbers?
Yeesh. Yeah, I mean, I think it's not necessarily what we're out of in terms of properties or even teams for that matter. It's actually assets. I think we're out of the point of buying static signage that basically would just have a big Budweiser or Bud Light logo. For a while, we were trying to drive brand awareness and association with the teams. We have enough levers to pull now with packaging and LED signage to do so, which is great. But we've spent 2 decades building up some of the biggest, most iconic signs in sports. So to go to a team in a renewal process and say, hey, I no longer want that $1 million Budweiser sign, can you take it down? And can I find $1 million in new value is a really hard conversation to have. So what we're seeing that works a lot well with us right now is the experiential piece of this, which is enhancing the fan experience, leveraging the marks at retail and enhancing the experience there as well. So it's everything from leveraging the power and the IP of a sports property to get incremental displays for Bud and Bud Light, It's the opportunity that a fan is sitting in the 400 section and I can now bring him down behind home plate. Those are the types of things that we're refocusing our efforts and our money towards to hopefully build a fan for life of not only the sports property, but of an Anheuser-Busch product. I think that will continue to be the evolution we have as we move away from some of the traditional assets that always have been and will continue to be pushed on us.
Well, Elizabeth brought it up before that you have Amex as a client, and they're one of the most recognizable brands in the world, and sponsorship is not about brand awareness for them anymore, and I think the same could be said for Anheuser-Busch. Valerie, is there anything that the Nationals are doing now that is unique or different than other teams, and who are the teams, and what are you seeing out there now, both on the league side, maybe Kathy can talk about this, cool new things that people are doing to create that authentic sponsorship that are doing more than just the brand awareness and the signage?
Yeah, so we're hearing consistently from brands that we do business with that they're struggling with the decision between, television's still a spend, right? So television, put my money in television, put my money in digital, put my money in experiential. And so I think one of the things that we're trying to do, I don't know if it's unique, but it's certainly a strategic focus of ours, is to present ourselves as a platform that addresses all three of those and make analytically based but also strategically based proposals that highlight how we can deliver each and every one. And I think the one you can get the most creative with is experiential. And so when we did our proposal for Anheuser-Busch, we had a lot of data in there, but we also had a lot of creative activation ideas. And that's why, getting back to what was said earlier, it's a marriage of like the story and the creativity and the data, because you need both halves of the brain working in these proposals. Like, we did a Nats Not Me activation with Anheuser-Busch that's starting this season, where if you're a lookalike to one of our players, you submit your picture on social, and then we're going to have a full lineup of the team, invite them down to the field, they're going to sign contracts, things like that. So, you want to have that blend and that balance at all times, and I think the teams and the properties that get that mix right are going to separate themselves from a revenue generation perspective.
So, from a different perspective, obviously the advent and proliferation of using analytics in sports is potentially changing a little bit of the culture of organizations. You're hiring a different type of person with a different type of skill set, and some argue that maybe it's becoming more of a bottom line business. Have you seen that? And feel free to chime in. Is there a different effect that culture is having with analytics?
At the properties, for sure. So the traditional model has been, that paradigm's been broken. So here we at the Nationals have set up a team. I think we have 8 full-time strategy and analytics staff. And the profile of who they are is very different than who traditionally worked for a team. So they're very much like the people in this room. They're MBAs, they tend to be younger, they tend to be analytically oriented. They're not sales guys or gals. So they just, even stylistically are a little different. And now, because of the way that we're structuring our business, they have a seat at the table at every single piece of our business. And it's not just corporate partnerships, it's retail, it's food and beverage, it's our ticketing business for sure. And so there is a cultural shift in that. So, the traditional salespeople are like, well, why is this guy or gal now sitting in my meeting, and why do they have a voice in this, and what do they know about this? And so my job is to manage that cultural shift. And then additionally, a lot of the function of what a strategy and analytics team does at a team used to be within the CFO's group. And so there's a cultural shift there too, in terms of why is all the kind of fun and sexy analysis moving to this other group. And so there's a ton of cultural change that comes with this. And if you get that wrong, you can see departments shut down and be closed to the goodness that's coming from the work that you've invested in and the work that's being done.
I think it's important culturally to balance everything and to bring in, we have some of the best and brightest research and insights minds in the business. We have some of the most creative storytellers on the brand side. We have a ton of player agents. And I promise you, nothing in the world is funnier than putting a research and insights person in a room with a bunch of player agents and watching him try to explain the regression analysis that he did to determine how much money that guy's players should be making in endorsement deals. It's highly entertaining. I suggest you try it at one point in your career. That being said, because there's such radically different brains, the tendency in a lot of organizations is to hire all these thinkers and put them in different corners. And I can remember one time walking through our office, and there's this very quiet, heads down, everybody scribbling on a whiteboard row, and then I turned a corner, and there's the colors and the music, and rap was playing, and people were playing football, and that's like, okay, well, here are my analysts, and here are my creatives. And they're both equally valuable, let's get them together. The magic, I said, comes before with the art and the science, the heart and the head. So the cultural impact is not about hiring a bunch of analysts or hiring a bunch of creators or, Lord help me, hiring a bunch of agents. It's putting them all together in one room and having them get accustomed to working together on a daily basis. And that's the cultural shift we're focusing on.
And having some wins. The first big sale, and when it works, that's really helped us kind of say like, oh, we'll try this again.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, we talked a little bit. I wouldn't say it's been a wholesale change, by the way. I think that what's changed the most in terms of culture in an organization like ours is just time. But I don't think our culture's changed because we're getting smarter about how to use this data. In fact, if there's one thing I would say, it's digital that's probably changed the culture more than anything. But we are working towards how do we collaborate better. And that I think is where all business is today, because you aren't successful if you operate in silos, whereas perhaps previously that was okay. But there's so much now that cross-pollinates that collaboration at least in our space, and it becomes incredibly important. And that is what's driving cultural shift for us. Is I think you guys are right in that you see that you do a better job. You're able to deliver more either for your client, or you're able to deliver more for your company if you're collaborating, because you're just smarter when you go in.
Yeah, and I think just for us, it's pretty easy and quick, is that we used to hire straight partnership marketing guys who had been with the industry for 10 or 20 years, had the connections to keep the connections going. Our whole department turned over about 9 months ago, and we hired a recent graduate from MIT, we hired somebody from Stats Inc., we hired somebody from ESPN. We went a complete different route because we have all this data, and if you don't know how to use it and how to take action off the insight, then we're going to be in a tough spot. So those relationships, to Kathy's point, continue to be extremely valuable. It was important that we had the right people in this new group who could speak the same language our finance, our logistics, our sales, our marketing team was speaking. So it's been a huge culture shift on our end, and I only expect it to get deeper and wider throughout our entire company, because you're seeing it in our brand teams, you're seeing our sales team, that where it used to, this commercial made me laugh 4 times, I think I'm good, it'll work at the Super Bowl. We run it through so much testing, August, September, October, that nothing sees the light of day without we have enough data to support that it's going to do well.
Or it has puppies in it.
Yeah.
That always helps.
So we're getting some really awesome questions from our audience. First one is, how can analytics reconcile properties' interest in driving higher rates versus brands wanting lower costs? Elizabeth?
When we do valuation work for properties, and we do quite a bit of it, the first thing I ask is, what do you want out of this assignment? What do you want to get from me? And their answer is, well, I need to know what to sell my naming rights or my kit sponsorship. I need to know what to sell it for. Invariably, it's the first question I get told. And I'm like, well, what do you want to sell it for? And it is always, well, so-and-so sold it for this, so therefore I want $1 million more than that. That is the extent of the rationale. And what I will say every single time is, I will not tell you what to sell this for. I will tell you what brands are willing to buy it for, which is a radically different metric. Because I don't care what you arbitrarily have decided you think is the fair market value, the ones who are on the other side of the table writing the check are the ones who are ultimately going to determine how much money you can get for this asset. So that's where we use a methodology, and it's sort of a 3-pronged methodology to come at it a bunch of different ways. We'll do market comparisons, we'll do impression-based analysis, we'll do comparables, we'll do everything that you need to do to sort of triangulate a range to be responsive to whatever way a brand can come at you. Some brands are still doing impression-based analysis. Some want to know market comparables. Some want to see future predictability of things like if a Super Bowl comes to my market. It depends. And so we will use the analytics to hone in on a range, not a number, and to come at it from the perspective of not what do you want to sell it for, but what is someone willing to buy it for? And that is a critical difference.
And by the way, when you're selling, it's the same thing. You can come up with all the prices, but the price of it is what somebody's willing to pay.
Exactly.
At the end of the day. Now you can modify your pricing as it relates to holding out things that perhaps have higher value to you, or that you think you can sell in a different way. But ultimately, it comes down to what you think it's worth, what they think it's worth, and the price is somewhere in the middle.
And predictively, we spend a lot of time in the industry to add to that. You can come up with certain other triggers. We spend a lot of time to isolate about 6 or 7 what we would call emotional triggers that will drive the price of an asset up. And that could be competitive threat, new product launch, hometown love, like all kinds of metrics that will sort of emotionally skew what the data and the analytics will say. And the key to that from a predictive perspective is to understand exactly how much they may emotionally skew it, to quantify the qualitative element in a way, which we've spent a lot of time trying to do. And then adding on top of that, to Valerie's point earlier, the right targeting behind it. Understanding which brands, which sectors, which industries are most likely to respond to those emotional triggers that will drive up the value of an asset. And if you couple the analytics with the quantified qualitative emotional stuff and the right level of targeting, it becomes a pretty powerful package.
But we are hearing from brands, we use Replicom data, we use media evaluation data, and when we put that out there, more and more we're just hearing like a wholesale dismissal of any of the numbers. And so, you know, as much as we are, and I'm curious as to your thoughts about that, because that's been, I think, increasing recently. So as much as we're wedded to using analytics, you got to find the right data point that's going to resonate, or, you know, you can use all the data you want. But do you see that increasingly being?
100%. So look, we look at analytics, especially data such as Replicom, and we actually have a proprietary platform that we've developed with a company called Nerve that we think is a lot more specific to the actual, what people are really trying to measure with that data, which is, again, a context and a clarity point of view of it's not just about measuring how much my sign is there, but what does it mean and how does it move people forward. But we look at that whole process, it's like looking at it as like looking at life, everything in moderation, everything in balance. It is a one component, but you've got to have the other 99 to tell the complete and total story. And people who put too much value on one set of data that by the time you get that report is 6 months later and probably incomplete, and by the way, you've moved on and you're past the Super Bowl, you're on to All-Star, it's irrelevant. So you've got to have that complete package.
We're in a tough spot for a lot of properties because you're not selling us anymore. We've been your property for years or decades, so you can't tell us what you think it can and cannot do because we know. We've been your partner for 10, 20 years. We know the impact it has on us. So the hard part we have is that if you were a playoff team and you were riding high for 5 years and we were there, we were getting a great ROI. But if you're not a playoff team and all of a sudden you fall off in your rebuilding year, we're not going to try and come back to you and be like, hey, we need a drastic decrease. Going back to the partnership and the emotion, like we respect, you know, the value we have when we're high, and we'll respect the value when you're low, knowing that we're in this for a partnership. However, there is multiple teams who will come out of a year where we've been hitting $1 million a year, $1 million a year. You won that World Series, that Super Bowl, and now you feel it's time to cash in. We're out. Like we know all the data analytics for years. We know the ups and downs, and at the end, we're gonna always median out somewhere. And for teams that want to cash in on their 1 year, and everybody's got a boss, everybody's boss is like, this is our year, this is our chance. Like we've known you for too long for you to be able to come back in and say, we know that the fan base is at the highest it's ever been. And like, well, I was with you when you were at the lowest you ever were. So like, we need to kind of keep the middle and, you know, respect the relationship a little bit because we have just the same data you do. So that's the one thing is I think that a lot of teams come in and think they're going to pull out that one piece of data that I couldn't find or I couldn't dig up, which, you know, likely is not the case.
Yeah, we've got the benefit of being a growth property, so it's a little bit different in terms of what Nick is talking about because, you know, obviously, in addition to MLS, we also represent the U.S. national teams. And let me just say, after what just happened this past summer with the women winning the Women's World Cup and what happened even the previous summer with our men down in Brazil, to be able to sit in front of a marketer and suggest that in 3 days in New York City, we had over 1 million people show up to celebrate the U.S. women's national team as they rode on a parade in the Canyon of Heroes is something that I don't really care what the data and the analytics say. At that particular moment, you can't bottle that. And that's the benefit, and that's where we've got an interesting position. And Nick talked a little bit about Orlando as another case. We're at this interesting period of time where there's a trajectory of the sport of soccer. And so the question is, how do you manage that relative to where we are, but more so, where are we going? And we're using a lot of data, a lot of analytics. We do find times where we can't find a suitable direction, which quite, frankly, we still do a lot of work with Anheuser-Busch with the national team But with Major League Soccer, we did a deal with their competitor, with Heineken. And the reality is, because there was a difference in the growth and where the sport is going. And that still gives us a little bit of a different type of way to have that conversation with brands. And so part of it is you're buying a growth stock in some respects, but you still have to make sure you're delivering. Whereas some of the other mature properties are a little bit more in the margins, and so it becomes a bit more about how, in fact, you're actually able to manage your business more effectively today. Ours is so much more is quite a bit different in that it's about, are we putting the right pieces in place so you're buying here and you are almost guaranteed that it's going to end up here, which is a different place to be. Kind of fun.
To your question earlier about, is there a scenario that the numbers didn't tell the full story, I would argue that the U.S. women's national team is the epitome of that.
Yeah.
I don't think any amount of numbers could have seen that passion coming. And I think it's because the league, but the players themselves embodied such a passionate spirit for the game, for each other as a team, for the fans, and it was the right message at the right time about the right moment in time for women and girls in sport, that it resonated in ways that no number could have ever predicted. You did a good job there, Kathy. Make them win next time, too.
Kathy, maybe you can answer this question. Is there a different analytical approach to big events like the World Cup or the Olympics that may be unique as opposed to just regular games, regular season?
Yeah, no question. I mean, when we look at the national team versus the league, and when you think about MLS, it's a lot more of a 24/7, 365. And so your ability to communicate and to be with the customer, the consumer, on a one-to-one basis is something that is very consistent. When you look at an event, and you look specifically, I won't talk to the Olympics per se, but rather the FIFA Women's World Cup or the FIFA World Cup, or more so what we'll see this summer with Copa America Centenario, which is essentially will be kind of like a mini World Cup. That's a moment in time where you have the great potential, and now I think we are in the case where the World Cup and the Women's World Cup, you know that this is going to be an opportunity where the country will stop. And so what you can do as a brand and how you now use that period of time is exponential, and it kind of breaks through any level of clutter. And to be fair, I think the Super Bowl does that as well with the NFL. But when you look at that, I think we now know enough to know that even though the event in 2018 for the men will be in Russia, it could be on Pluto, and it will still matter to every fan in this country. And that now, as a country, you know that people will stop. And that's because the data tells us that, the analytics tell us that, but more so because we actually saw it with 30,000 people at Soldier Field to watch a game on the Jumbotron, not actually to watch it live. So those types of things you can actually look at and say, okay, now we know. The question is, and I think ABI is a great example of that, is, okay, now what do we do to make sure that we're capitalizing on that? And when we go back to retail as an example, and for many years we talked with Anheuser-Busch, we talked with Coca-Cola. In 2014 in Brazil, the United States was the #1 retail market in the world for Coca-Cola. And I can tell you for that event, which is something that took us 20 years to see that happen, which means that it actually resonated more to the customer, and they sold more product and were in more retail establishments than they were for the Olympic Games. And you add that to everything around what was happening in the rest of the world, you sold a lot. You guys were probably in the same boat, sold a whole heck of a lot of product. And that starts to become the different type of data and analytics, because it's products that goes back to your question of bottom line, delivered for the bottom line.
Yeah, we do a really good job of focusing on big events because we can rally the entire system to focus on one thing. What we really struggle with is the local small, you have 15 basketball games a night or 15 football games on a Sunday. We struggle with scale because providing a level of consistency across all those properties is extremely challenging. And honestly, the biggest challenge we have right now is we're getting a lot of data from a lot of venues, a lot of partners, and we just really don't either have, one, the bandwidth, or two, the right people in place to use it. We've got a good example we have out in LA is, we know that the Dodgers are going to sell out every night. That's not a question. So if we do an activation any night of the week, it's going to be packed. What we had a problem is that when we originally partnered with them, when our renewal was like, you can own our marquee #1 starter night every night. We're like, great, that sounds like every time Clayton Kershaw's pitching, I want to be there. Well, the issue is it's the opposite. Clayton Kershaw is the fastest pitch count. He has the least pitches per strikeout. So with the Dodgers fans showing up second to third inning, when the Clayton Kershaw's pitching, it's more like fourth, fifth inning, and we're missing 38% of our beer sales. So I'm not sponsoring a Clayton Kershaw night anymore because I'm missing 2 or 3 innings. I want that guy getting banged up. I want that guy who's like third, fourth, but those are the types of things as we got that data, and we honestly sat on it for 6 months. We work with our sales team, actually they bubbled it back up to us and said, hey, look at this. So we'll continue to partner across the board, we have the same data for NFL. When teams are getting blown out, people are leaving. So if it's the Patriots and they're playing the Dolphins and it's not a good matchup, I'm probably not going to run my promotions that night, but when they're playing the Jets or when they're playing somebody who's a better marquee, we needed to sweat our assets at a local level more efficiently than what we're doing currently on the big game. Because on the big game for soccer, World Series, All-Star games, it's easy for us to focus. We just lose a lot of that focus on the local level.
It's critical. You got to use the data and the analytics to inform your decisions and make your partnerships, but then you can't just put it on a shelf and let it get dusty until you have to renew that deal. You have to continue to constantly look at the numbers on a day in, day out basis, because that is one of the more powerful aspects of the data, is helping you more quickly and efficiently root out a problem and the source of that problem and turn it around in almost real time to better your business. But that is unique. A lot of brands still are like, okay, I made my decision based on analysis. I'll dust that off 4 years from now when I have to renew.
It's interesting though, and to hear Nick talk about it in terms of going back to the league versus the event at a national level. What we are constantly looking at is how can we integrate even more effectively with components of our business. So, for example, what are we doing in CRM? And we have actually centralized our data warehouse, and so we've got a centralized database across the entire league, which has allowed us to see massive increases in the number of records that we have. And I see the guys from SAS over here who work with us as we start to now really get into the details of that, of how and what can we do to use that as an asset as we talk to our partners. And so I keep coming back to somewhat of a bespoke model, which is the benefit of this is there are some things that are extraordinarily focused on data, analytics, and some that is emotion, go back to then the art and the science. Because ultimately what we're trying to figure out is how do we help Anheuser-Busch or Coca-Cola or any number of partners sell more product? And why is it a more efficient buy than just putting tonnage in advertising? And the model is changing dramatically. Going back to the question of what's it like 10 years later, it is categorically different today than it was 10 years ago, and just in terms of the layering of these types of deals and relationships.
Kathy, someone is asking a question about how the scandal that FIFA went through over the last year or two, does that change brand value? Can you turn around and say, well, no, the numbers are still there, it's just as good? And, really in any situation where there's an issue with the brand.
Yeah, obviously we as a sport have gone through a tough time since May of last year, and I heard it best from a client who said, at the end of the day, a fan is a fan of the game. They're not a fan of the people behind the game, of the executives. Like we're suits. Nobody's a fan of ours.
I'm a fan of yours.
Speak for yourself.
Yeah, exactly. So, fortunately that holds true, and the game continues. And in fact, the Women's World Cup occurred right after all the scandals took place, or the start of them. And it didn't dilute the power of that brand and the power of what the fans' experience was with that. But clearly, it has had an impact on the game. Fortunately for us in this country, and fortunately for us in terms of representing MLS and the national teams, we can stand very effectively and transparently and say that we're on the right side of things. But it's definitely been, and we've seen clients who have said now is not the time to take certain deals into our board because it's just, financial institutions in particular. But we're getting through that, and actually, we have recently announced a number of deals around Copa America Centenario that are really reputable brands that are standing up and saying, we're on the other side of this, and now it's time for us to show the world how to appropriately and properly put on an event that previously might have been tainted.
We're seeing brands ask of us especially after everything that happened with the Clippers, is there's some morality clauses that are now being part of what's being proposed for corporate partnership contracts. And some of them are really, quite frankly, like too broad for us to agree to, because it could touch into like anything that anyone in your company did. And so now we're in this process of having to like negotiate around like what we can live with in that regard. But that's been one of the biggest, at least in the day-to-day operation of corporate partnership business for us, impacts of some of these I think the word that was used was scandals that have occurred, that brands are asking us to take more responsibility, and if something happens, they are able to get out of the contract.
Elizabeth, are you advising your brands to have those types of clauses or to maybe steer themselves away from controversial properties?
I find morality clauses with teams and properties in league largely ineffectual, to be honest with you. I understand their purpose when it comes to direct one-to-one relationships. I'm a brand, I'm sponsoring X athlete. That one human being's behavior has more of a direct correlation to you and your brand associates of value. So we'll deal with them a lot on the player and the athlete side, a lot more frequently than we would ever counsel them at a partner in a league. To Kathy's point, it's about making sure you're partnering and identifying and partnering with the teams and leagues that you know and can trust are going to be on the right side of situations like this. And that's what we counsel more in our clients, is that rigor in evaluating their potential partnerships, as opposed to trying to insert morality clauses in teams. Because to your point, I associate with the Nationals. If one person in the back office of the Nationals does something that I find offensive in some way, the Nationals still stand for what I need them to stand for in the marketplace. And as long as you trust your partner to have that sort of fortitude to deal with any issues and to attack it head on and to be transparent and responsible and ethical in the marketplace, then you can get past one person at a league or a team office or a player on a team doing something that you find scandalous.
What about something like cause marketing or community value? Is there any usage of analytics in those types of situations, Nick?
I mean, we do designated driver and education programs across every property we touch. We're actually rolling it over this year. It's been pretty basic for the last, I would say, couple years. I think what we're trying to do is our point of communication typically is after or during the process of purchasing our product. There's a message. We actually have sign-ups. Last year across all of our properties, we signed up 180,000 designated drivers, to where if you show up at a venue, instead of you purchasing a beer, we will purchase a Coke or a water. Those are the types of things, regardless if I had 10,000 people or 200,000 people, we can't put a value on, someone's life of, driving their buddies home. The one thing we are seeing from a data standpoint is that it does help us, in the perspective of how somebody views our brand. When we ran a Super Bowl spot this year, we ran the Budweiser typical spot, which is, here's how big we are, here's how great we are, but we also ran a spot with Helen Mirren, which was all about responsible drinking and not drinking and driving. And we saw the brand health and brand perception go up strictly off the fact that we weren't promoting our beer, but we were promoting responsibility. So we will continue to do that regardless. It's just our responsibility. And I mean, it's one of our core things that we continue to believe in.
That was a great spot, and it was really well done, which I think also helped it. Plus, she's kind of awesome.
Yeah.
It also helped it break through the clutter and get the message apart. I find a lot of brands sort of hide from the cause marketing message. They do it as a check the box, I feel like I have to, but those who really own it and go for it in the authentic tone and voice, which I think ABI did with that spot, is what helps it really make the brand metric lift.
There's a lot of data, too, that supports that CR-related activations have higher recall, and the sentiment is more positive from fans. And so we'll definitely communicate that to brands. I think brands sense that. And so, when we look at putting together our marketing platforms, we usually always have a CR element, a community relations element in there, because brands value them for those very reasons.
Is there, analytics has obviously evolved a great deal. Is there still something out there that you don't have that you wish you did?
I'm laughing because all those guys in the middle row there that are a part of my research and analytics team asked me to get up here and ask for a Keanu Reeves Neo-style ability to look into the Matrix in real time. And I'm like, that's what I have to work with every day. That's the metric they want. For me, I think what we do a really good job of as an industry now compared to 10 years ago is capturing it one team at a time, one season at a time, one event at a time. What I'm looking forward to in the next 10 years of data analysis is the longitudinal look at it. the predictive analysis ability. And you're not going to get that until you begin to start linking and labeling these 1 and 2 events a year, or looking at a season as an isolated moment in time. When we start really capturing the data, real-time basis, linking and labeling it to how the trends have come from before, and looking 10 and 20 years into the future and being able to predict it, that's where you're getting a real sense of not just the intelligence, but sort of the emotional intelligence factors that'll help drive it forward.
Yeah, for me, I don't know if I can pinpoint it as eloquently as Liz just did. I'd say from our perspective, it's about making sure that you continue to you listen. Because I think ultimately what we have seen and where you see the opportunity is to listen to where evolution is occurring and to be a part of that evolution, because the game is going to continue to change. The business is going to continue to change. We were talking about how different it is today. And I think the one thing that we all, at least from a property standpoint, have to be aware of and must always pay attention to is we're in a business about change. We're not in a business of today it works and this is how it will always work. And so I don't think if I could look as far into the future, I would have put a lot of stock on Facebook and Twitter or any number of other things. What I'd say is we just have to be aware that it's going to continue to evolve and be ready to move with the industry as opposed to try to catch up to the industry.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest gap we continue to have as we evolve from the traditional assets and a league or a team deal of measurable media, measurable signage and stuff like that, as we continue to do much more experiential-led activations, is measuring the value. If I'm doing a big event where I'm hitting a couple hundred people, I can do a fairly decent cost per contact. But if I'm doing one upgrade for a couple or a family or whatever it is, what is the true value of that long term, 2, 3, 5 years from now? We know the impact is we made for a fan for life, but what does that mean? What's the quantitative value of me actually just doing that one activation versus throwing up a billboard? So internally, we're having a lot of struggles right now of putting some very hard data behind us shifting from all these very measurable items to not measurable items. So we still believe in the theory that the experiential items will make a lifelong fan, but we still can't measure it yet. So we're really looking hard to find a way to measure the true ROI on some of these experiential elements.
A better formula for prospecting, which we're continuing to work on and refine, because we have limited budgets to pursue specific sales. And if you take a peanut butter approach, you end up not really putting anything towards your book of business. But if you knew that these were the right prospects, with some level of certainty and data, you could invest more in them and you could be justified in doing that and knowing that the ROI would be there. So just continue refinement of prospecting.
Well, I think that's all the time we have. So thank you guys for coming out and listening to us.